Gentlemen, thank you for meeting us. We are aligned on the core terms and ready to proceed.
I can't let him walk into a slaughter. After 2 years hiding, I can't ignore this.
Don't sign it. The translator is lying. You didn't agree to this.
What? That's not true?
I knew it. We're done here.
Treason is rarely shouted. It is usually whispered in the voice of someone you love. The most dangerous weapon in a room full of armed men isn't a gun. It's the space between two languages controlled by a liar. If the man in the black shirt signed the paper on the table, he would be dead before dessert was served. And only the woman holding the yellow cleaning rag knew it. The air in the penthouse restaurant was thick, with the kind of silence that costs billions. High above the glowing Seoul skyline, a devastating transfer of power was disguised as a standard corporate merger. Bae Hyun-soo sat at the center of the dark wood table, an imposing figure in a crisp, unbuttoned black shirt, the scales of a saltwater crocodile tattoo barely visible at his collar. He was a king about to unknowingly sign away his crown. To his left sat his wife, Han Seo-yeon. Immaculate in a tailored white power suit, she was the bridge between Bae and the Japanese delegates across the table. Her voice was calm, melodic, and entirely deceitful. Tameka Edwards was supposed to be invisible. Wearing a drab gray cleaner's uniform, she systematically wiped down a nearby serving station with a yellow microfiber rag. But Tameka was no ordinary cleaner. She was a former intelligence linguist who spoke 8 languages flawlessly. As she listened to Seo-yeon translate, the dissonance struck her like a physical blow. Seo-yeon wasn't translating a merger. She was translating a surrender, a death warrant. Tameka's grip tightened on the yellow rag. She had spent 2 years hiding from the world, but letting this man walk into a slaughter felt like a crime she couldn't ignore. Hello, family. Welcome back to Afro K Mafia Diary. Before we proceed to the story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Kindly drop it in the comments section and also subscribe to this channel. Now, let's continue with the story. Bae Hyun-soo held the heavy gold pen over the thick stack of papers. The tip of the pen hovered just inches above the dotted line. The Japanese businessmen across the dark wood table watched with quiet excitement. Beside Bae, his wife, Han Seo-yeon, offered a gentle, encouraging smile. Her elegant white suit gleamed under the soft dining room lights. She had just translated the final terms. To Bae, it sounded like a simple sale of empty warehouses. He took a deep breath, ready to sign away a small piece of his empire to secure a peaceful future. In the shadows, Tameka made her choice. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She knew the rules of her new life. Stay quiet, stay invisible, keep cleaning. But her mind, trained by years of high-level intelligence work, screamed at her to act. Seo-yeon had not said the word for warehouses. She had used a very specific, formal Japanese term for coastal shipping routes. It was a total surrender of Bae's most valuable assets. If he signed that paper, his rivals would control his entire supply chain by midnight. He would be powerless and likely dead by morning. Tameka gripped her yellow cleaning rag. She stepped away from the serving station and walked toward the center of the room. Every step felt like walking through thick mud. She approached Bae's side of the table. Pretending to spot a water ring near his crystal glass, she leaned in close. Seo-yeon's eyes narrowed, watching the cleaner with sudden suspicion. Tameka kept her head down. She raised her left hand slightly, shielding her mouth from the rest of the table. She positioned herself right next to Bae's ear. Her voice was barely a breath, carrying only to him. "She just sold your shipping routes, not the warehouses," Tameka whispered into the quiet air. "Do not sign." Bae's hand froze mid-air. The gold pen stopped moving. Slowly, very slowly, he turned his head. His cold, dark eyes locked directly onto Tameka's terrified but resolute face. For a split second, time stood still in the luxury penthouse. Bae Hyun-soo stared at the black woman in the gray cleaner's uniform. His expression did not change, but a dangerous storm brewed behind his dark eyes. Tameka held his gaze for a moment. Praying he understood the weight of her warning. "Excuse me." Han Seo-yeon's sharp voice cut through the silence. The gentle smile vanished from her face. She glared at Tameka, her manicured nails tapping the table. Speaking in rapid, angry Korean, Seo-yeon scolded the cleaner for interrupting such an important business meeting. She ordered Tameka to leave the room immediately and threatened to have her fired. Tameka quickly bowed her head, playing the part of a frightened worker. She clutched the yellow rag tightly to her chest, apologized softly, and backed away. Her heart was beating so fast she felt dizzy. As she retreated to the shadowy corner of the dining room, she watched the table closely. Had she done enough? Or had she just signed her own death warrant for nothing? Bae slowly lowered the gold pen. He placed it carefully on the polished wood beside the contract. He did not look angry, but his silence made the air feel incredibly heavy. He looked down at the documents, studying the dense Japanese text that he could not read. Then, he shifted his gaze to his beautiful wife. Seo-yeon quickly put her sweet smile back on, looking at him with innocent, questioning eyes. Bae decided he needed to test the waters. If the cleaner was lying, he would deal with her later. But if his own wife was setting a trap, he needed to know right now. He leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. Speaking in clear, slow English, Bae asked, "My love, before I sign, could you confirm one detail? Ask them if my private cargo ships will still have full access to the eastern ports next month." Seo-yeon smiled brightly and turned to the businessmen. She spoke to them smoothly in Japanese, translating his question completely wrong. The smile remained on Han Seo-yeon's beautiful face, but her eyes held a sudden flicker of real panic. Bae Hyun-soo did not shout, nor did he flip the heavy wooden table in a fit of rage. He was a man who ruled his dangerous empire through cold control, not loud anger. Instead, his large hands simply tightened around the expensive, solid gold pen he was still holding. He squeezed it with brutal force. With a sharp, sudden crack that echoed loudly through the totally silent penthouse, the thick metal snapped cleanly in two. Dark black ink spilled over his knuckles, dripping heavily onto the flawless white table runner like thick drops of blood. The Japanese delegates jumped in their seats, their eyes wide with sudden shock and fear. Seo-yeon gasped loudly, reaching out a trembling hand to touch his arm, but he pulled away fast. Bae calmly wiped his dirty hands with a cloth napkin. He forced a polite, fake smile and bowed his head slightly toward the businessmen. Speaking in a smooth, perfectly controlled voice, he informed them that he needed a strict 24-hour review period before making a final decision. The delegates, sensing the deeply dangerous shift in the room's energy, did not argue. They quickly packed their leather briefcases and hurried toward the glass elevators. Within minutes, the luxurious dining area was completely empty, except for Bae, his now trembling wife, and his stone-faced bodyguards standing quietly by the walls. The silence was heavier now, pressing down on the room like a physical weight. Seo-yeon tried to speak, her voice shaking badly as she asked him what was wrong, but Bae completely ignored her. He stood up slowly, walked over to the massive double doors, and turned the heavy brass lock until it clicked shut loudly. He wiped the very last drop of ink from his fingers, turned his dark, cold eyes toward his wife, and gave a single, terrifying order. "Bring me the cleaner." Two massive armed guards grabbed Tameka by the arms and dragged her into the dark, soundproof office at the back of the restaurant. They shoved her roughly into a hard leather chair and stepped back, standing by the door like stone statues. A moment later, Bae Hyun-soo walked into the room. He had taken off his suit jacket, and the sleeves of his black shirt were rolled up, showing the dark scales of the crocodile tattoo on his chest. The air in the room felt freezing cold. He walked slowly around her chair, studying her like a puzzle he needed to solve. Finally, he leaned against the heavy oak desk and crossed his arms. He demanded to know exactly who she was. His voice was dangerously low as he asked how a simple cleaner working in Seoul knew the secret underground dialect of the Kyoto Mafia. Tameka forced herself to look confused and scared. She gripped her knees tightly and lied, telling him she did not know what he meant. She claimed she just watched a lot of Japanese crime dramas on television and had picked up the language from the internet. She begged him to let her go back to her cleaning duties, promising she would never interrupt a meeting again. Bae did not smile. He did not blink. He just stared at her with a look that cut right through her lies. He slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a thin, glowing computer tablet. He tapped the screen a few times and then turned it around so she could see. The screen showed a clear, high-quality picture of her face next to a bold red warning symbol. Tamika felt her heart completely stop in her chest. Bay leaned in very close, his voice barely a whisper. "If you are just a simple cleaner who watches television," he said coldly, "why does a global facial recognition search flag you as a highly trained, deceased CIA agent?" Tamika stared at the glowing tablet showing her true, secret identity. There was no point in lying anymore. She took a deep, shaking breath and finally told Bae Hyun-soo the truth. She explained that she used to be a top forensic linguist for a very powerful intelligence agency. Her job was to analyze the deep meaning of foreign words and find hidden traps in legal documents. But she was simply too good at her job. 2 years ago, she discovered her own bosses were secretly helping dangerous criminals steal millions of dollars. Before she could report them, they framed her for the exact same crime and tried to kill her. She had been hiding in the shadows as a simple cleaner ever since just to stay alive. Bae listened quietly without interrupting, his dark eyes shining with sudden, sharp interest. He instantly realized this frightened woman in a gray uniform was not a problem, but a highly valuable weapon. Her unique skills were exactly what he needed to win the secret war his own wife had just started. Meanwhile, outside the heavy wooden doors of the locked office, Han Seo-yeon was pacing nervously down the empty, wool-carpeted hallway. She knew her brilliant master plan was completely falling apart. That stupid cleaner had ruined everything at the very last second. Seo-yeon rushed into a private luxury bathroom and quickly locked the door behind her. Her perfectly manicured hands were shaking badly as she pulled out a hidden, untraceable black cell phone from her designer purse. She dialed a secure number she promised to use only in an absolute emergency. As the phone rang, she typed a master code into the screen, completely overriding the penthouse security system so the dark service elevator would turn back on. When a cold, deep voice finally answered on the other end of the line, Seo-yeon did not waste any time saying hello. She ordered a professional hitman to come up immediately. "Find the black cleaner," Seo-yeon whispered dangerously into the phone. "Kill Tamika." Inside the empty restaurant, the heavy metal doors of the dark service elevator slowly slid open. Han Seo-yeon had secretly used her master security clearance to reactivate the power from her phone, allowing the killer inside the locked penthouse. A tall man dressed in a black delivery uniform stepped out silently, carrying a deadly, silenced pistol. He moved like a ghost through the quiet hallways, heading straight toward the back rooms. Tamika had just been ordered by Bae to wait safely in the main kitchen while he spoke with his guards. However, because of her intense past training as an elite agent, she never fully relaxed her guard. She noticed a cold draft coming from the hallway and saw a quick shadow move across the shiny metal wall of the giant refrigerator. When the dangerous hitman turned the corner and quickly raised his gun, Tamika was already moving. She grabbed a heavy iron frying pan from the stove and swung it with all her strength, knocking the weapon right out of his hand. A brutal, completely silent struggle broke out in the middle of the dark kitchen. Just as the angry killer grabbed her by the neck, the kitchen doors burst open. Bae's massive bodyguards rushed in, pulling the hitman off Tamika and throwing him violently to the hard tile floor. As they pinned the attacker down, a small red light began flashing rapidly on a strange device attached to the killer's belt. Tamika recognized it instantly. It was a biometric dead man's switch. Because the hitman's heart rate had suddenly spiked and he missed his secure check-in, a silent alarm was instantly sent to the cartel waiting outside. The quiet assassination had completely failed, meaning the violent, full-scale military breach was about to begin. An hour later, the blood in the kitchen was cleaned up, and a terrifying game of pretend began. Bae Hyun-soo ordered his 4 most dangerous and loyal lieutenants to join him for a late-night private dinner in the main dining room. He forced his wife, Han Seo-yeon, to sit right beside him as if absolutely nothing was wrong. The biggest shock came when the double doors opened and Tamika walked in, wearing a sleek, dark dress Bae had quickly provided. He introduced her to his confused men as his brilliant new international business consultant. The air in the room was thick with fake smiles and hidden threats as they ate. Tameka knew she needed to prepare for the worst, so she started a very specific, calculated conversation. She intentionally spilled a small drop of water on a complex document, then politely asked Seo-yeon to read the fine print aloud to help her understand a difficult Korean business term. Seo-yeon, trying to act like a perfect, arrogant hostess, fell for the trick. She read the document clearly, having no idea Tameka was secretly recording her exact voice patterns on a hidden phone under the table. Finally, when the dessert plates were cleared, Bae turned to Seo-yeon with a cold, fake smile. He politely asked his loving wife to do him the honor of pouring the red wine for their special new guest. Seo-yeon stood up with shaking hands and picked up the heavy crystal bottle. As she leaned over to fill Tameka's glass, Tameka looked right into her panicked eyes. In a calm, quiet voice, Tameka casually mentioned that the Ghost Dragon cartel was currently having major problems with their offshore accounts. It was top-secret intel only a true syndicate insider would know. Seo-yeon gasped loudly, and the heavy crystal bottle slipped right through her fingers, crashing loudly against the table. The sound of the shattering crystal bottle echoed through the silent dining room like a gunshot. Dark red wine spilled completely over the white tablecloth, dripping onto the hard floor like fresh blood. The 4 lieutenants instantly jumped to their feet, reaching quickly for the hidden weapons inside their jackets. Bae Hyun-soo did not even blink. He just stared at the broken glass, waiting for the truth to finally come out. Han Seo-yeon stared at the mess, breathing heavily, before she slowly stood up straight. The terrified, innocent look completely vanished from her beautiful face, replaced by a cold and twisted sneer. She did not bother pretending anymore. She looked directly at her husband and proudly announced her deep loyalty to the Ghost Dragon cartel, his biggest and most deadly rival. She laughed a cruel, harsh laugh, mocking Bae for being so blind and trusting. She boldly warned him that he was already out of time. Seo-yeon slowly pointed at the large, expensive grandfather clock in the corner of the room. The hands were resting exactly on midnight. She confidently explained that the silent hitman in the kitchen was supposed to send a secret text message right at this exact minute to confirm the coast was clear. Because Tameka had taken him down, that vital message was never sent. The missed deadline was the ultimate signal. Just as the clock finished striking 12, a strange, high-pitched sound pierced through the thick glass of the penthouse windows. Flashing red and blue lights suddenly painted the dark city skyline. Hundreds of heavily armed men wearing dark, unmarked tactical gear were pouring out of armored vans on the street below, raising their dangerous weapons toward the sky. It was not a police raid. It was a massive, violent military coup, and they were completely trapped. Heavy steel security shutters slammed down over the massive glass windows, locking the luxury penthouse in total darkness except for the flashing red emergency lights. Bae Hyun-soo quickly ordered his men to grab his treacherous wife. 2 massive guards dragged Han Seo-yeon to a heavy oak chair in the corner of the room. They tied her arms and legs securely with thick ropes. Seo-yeon did not fight back. She just sat there, laughing softly to herself as the trap finally closed. Tameka stood near the center of the room, her heart pounding as she listened to the chaotic shouting of the cartel's soldiers outside the building. Suddenly, she heard a very specific, high-pitched electronic clicking sound hidden beneath the radio static of a guard's walkie-talkie. She recognized that exact encrypted radio frequency from her old days tracking dangerous international terrorists. Without asking for permission, Tameka rushed over to the restaurant's main security computer. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, typing complex hacking commands to tap directly into the cartel's private communication feed. A harsh, robotic voice began barking orders in a coded mixture of numbers and street slang. Tameka closed her eyes, listening closely as she translated the complex enemy strategy perfectly in her head. Her face suddenly turned as white as a ghost. She slowly looked up from the glowing screen and stared directly at Bae, who was tightly gripping his loaded weapon. "They are not trying to blow the doors open," Tameka whispered, her voice shaking with pure fear. The cartel leader just confirmed that the penthouse's internal bulletproof shutters have been secretly disabled from the inside, and our outgoing emergency phone lines are completely cut. SEO Yan was sitting at the table with us all night, so she could not have done it. One of your 3 bodyguards is a mole. Extreme paranoia instantly poisoned the locked room. The 3 remaining bodyguards quickly stepped away from each other, their hands hovering dangerously close to their holstered weapons. Bae Hyun-soo raised his own gun, his cold, dark eyes snapping back and forth between the men who had sworn to protect his life. He demanded to know who the dirty traitor was, but they all desperately shouted their total innocence. There was absolutely no time for a slow, careful investigation. The cartel soldiers would breach the metal doors in less than 3 minutes. Tameka stepped right into the middle of the tense circle, raising her hands to calm the men down. She told Bae she could easily find the hidden liar right now using a rapid psychological linguistic baseline test. She quickly explained that when people lie under extreme stress, their panicked brain completely changes the way they build basic sentences. Tameka pointed strictly to the first guard and asked him exactly what he ate for breakfast and which elevator he rode tonight. He answered directly. She asked the second guard the exact same simple questions, and his sentence structure remained totally normal and confident. Finally, she turned to Jin, Bae's oldest, most trusted and highest-ranking lieutenant. She sharply asked him exactly when he last checked his secure radio channel tonight. Jin swallowed hard and answered, but his words were incredibly strange. Instead of using direct personal statements, he used weird passive verbs and emotionally distant language, separating himself from the timeline of the night's violent events. Tameka's highly trained ears instantly caught the tiny, invisible hesitation buried in his grammar. She slowly turned to Bae and pointed a single, steady finger at Jin's terrified face. "He is the one," Tameka declared loudly over the sirens. "His brain is subconsciously hiding the truth in his broken word choices." Before Bae could even process the shocking betrayal of his best friend, the panicked lieutenant finally snapped. Jin instantly drew his heavy black weapon from his shoulder holster, aiming the deadly barrel squarely at Bae's chest. The deafening roar of gunfire shattered the tense silence in the penthouse. Jin, the traitorous lieutenant, hesitated for only 1 second. But Bae Hyun-soo was much faster. Without blinking, Bae drew his own weapon and fired a single perfect shot, instantly neutralizing his former best friend. The loud blast was the signal the cartel soldiers outside had been waiting for. Heavy explosions suddenly shook the massive double doors as the enemy began their violent breach. In the blinding chaos of smoke and flying wood, Han Seo-yeon made her desperate move. She knocked her heavy oak chair backward, shattering the wooden legs against the hard floor, and quickly wiggled her wrists completely out of the loosened ropes. While Bae was distracted by the attack, she sprinted toward the private emergency elevator that led directly up to the roof. Tameka did not panic or freeze in fear. She picked up Jin's dropped weapon from the bloody floor and stood firmly next to the Mafia boss. Working together like a perfectly trained military team, Tameka and Bae laid down heavy covering fire, forcing the confused cartel soldiers to retreat back into the hallway. They pushed a massive marble statue in front of the broken doors, successfully securing the immediate perimeter. As the smoke slowly cleared, Bae looked at the fierce black woman standing bravely beside him. He saw no fear in her eyes, only cold, tactical focus, and a deep, unspoken respect silently passed between them. But their brief moment of victory completely vanished when Bae noticed the empty, broken ropes in the corner of the room. He angrily kicked the door of the private elevator open, and they both sprinted up the concrete stairs to the dark roof. The freezing night wind howled loudly as they burst out onto the massive, brightly lit helipad. Seo-yeon was desperately running toward the edge, waiting for her escape chopper to appear in the cloudy sky. Bae sprinted forward, grabbing his treacherous wife roughly by her arm. He spun her around and pressed the cold steel barrel of his gun directly against her forehead. The freezing wind whipped violently across the dark rooftop, but Han Seo-yeon did not look scared at all. Even with the deadly barrel of her husband's gun pressed tightly against her head, the beautiful traitor just tilted her head back and laughed. It was a cold, evil sound that echoed loudly over the distant police sirens down below. Bae Hyun-soo gritted his teeth, his finger resting dangerously on the heavy metal trigger. He angrily ordered her to tell the cartel to call off their massive attack, but she simply shook her head with a cruel, mocking smile. She proudly revealed that she had not just been translating fake documents downstairs at the dinner table. Earlier that evening, when Bae was distracted by the Japanese businessman, she had secretly copied his personal digital signature. While they were fighting for their lives inside the locked penthouse, her hidden computer program had been quietly working in the background. Seo-yeon happily announced that she had already successfully transferred 50% of Bae's entire liquid fortune into heavily guarded, untraceable offshore bank accounts. She looked directly into Bae's furious eyes and explained the terrible trap she had brilliantly built. Only her unique biometric voice print could ever unlock those secret, hidden funds. If Bae pulled the trigger and killed her right now out of anger, billions of dollars would be permanently lost forever. He would instantly go completely bankrupt, his loyal men would abandon him, and his massive criminal empire would crumble into dust by morning. For the very first time in his powerful life, the great Korean Mafia boss looked totally defeated. His broad shoulders slumped heavily, and his hand shook as he slowly lowered his weapon, realizing his evil wife had actually won the war. Suddenly, Tameka stepped forward from the dark shadows of the concrete stairwell. She calmly walked right up to the mocking, victorious woman. Without saying a word, the former elite intelligence agent slowly and loudly cracked her knuckles in the freezing air. "Show me the routing numbers," Tameka demanded coldly. Bae Hyun-soo quickly dragged his laughing wife away from the freezing edge of the rooftop and shoved her into his private security office on the top floor. He locked the heavy steel door just as a massive explosion shook the building, signaling that the cartel's soldiers had finally broken through the downstairs barricades. Time was running out. Tameka immediately sat down at the large, glowing computer terminal on Bae's desk and cracked her knuckles. Seo-yeon simply crossed her arms and sneered, bragging that the offshore banks required her exact biological voice print to move a single penny. Tameka completely ignored the wicked woman. She pulled out the hidden phone she had used during the tense dinner party downstairs. Using highly classified CIA audio software from a small flash drive, Tameka quickly uploaded the secret recordings of Seo-yeon reading the complex business document out loud. Because Tameka had tricked her into saying those specific numbers and financial terms earlier, the advanced computer program instantly stitched the audio clips together. It built a perfect, flawless digital clone of the trader's exact voice, saying the required passwords. The heavy steel door of the office suddenly groaned loudly as the cartel soldiers started attacking it with heavy hammers from the other side. Bae raised his weapon, ready to fight to his last breath. Sweat dripped down Tameka's forehead as the computer screen flashed red, asking for the final verbal confirmation. Tameka pressed play on the audio file, and Seo-yeon's cloned voice spoke the passwords perfectly into the microphone. In that exact, terrifying second, Tameka slammed her hand down hard on the enter key. The glowing computer screen instantly turned bright green, showing massive numbers rapidly changing. She let out a deep breath and slowly spun her chair around to face the shocked Mafia boss and his suddenly silent wife. "I didn't just get all your money back," Tameka said with a cold, victorious smile. "I drained their accounts too." The heavy steel door of the office finally burst open with a terrifying crash, and a dozen heavily armed cartel soldiers rushed into the room. They pointed their deadly weapons directly at Bae Hyun-soo, ready to end his life. But before a single bullet could be fired, the commanding officer's satellite phone began ringing wildly. The large man answered it, and his angry face instantly turned completely pale. He listened quietly for a few seconds before slowly lowering his heavy rifle. The Ghost Dragon cartel leaders had just discovered that their entire international fortune had completely vanished into thin air. Without any money to pay the dangerous soldiers or protect their own illegal businesses, the massive criminal empire was already collapsing in total panic. The officer glared fiercely at Han Seo-yeon, the woman who had promised them billions. Bae Hyun-soo did not show any mercy. He was a ruthless mafia king who had just shot his best friend in the chest, and he was not going to let his evil wife simply walk away. Bay calmly lowered his own weapon and made a cold, terrifying deal. He told the angry officer that the cartel could leave his building alive right now, but they had to take Seo Yan as payment for their lost money. Seo Yan screamed in pure terror, desperately falling to her knees and begging her husband to save her. Bay just turned his back on her completely. Two massive cartel soldiers grabbed the fallen queen by her arms, dragging her violently toward the broken doorway to face a horrible fate. As she was pulled away into the dark shadows, she twisted around and screamed with pure hatred. She looked directly at the former cleaner who had completely destroyed her life, loudly swearing a bloody revenge. Tameka simply stood there with her arms crossed, staring back with cold, unfazed eyes. As the dangerous room finally grew quiet, Bae Hyun-soo turned to Tameka and asked a simple, unexpected question. "Will you stay?" 6 months had passed since that violent night in Seoul. The freezing wind of the ruined penthouse was permanently traded for the glowing neon lights of a luxurious Tokyo boardroom. Bae sat powerfully at the head of a massive glass table. He wore his signature unbuttoned black shirt, the dark crocodile tattoo peeking out above his collar. But the woman sitting directly to his right was completely different. Tameka Edwards was no longer wearing a cheap gray uniform, and she certainly was not holding a dirty yellow cleaning rag. Instead, she wore a perfectly tailored black silk suit. She sat with perfect posture, projecting total confidence and deadly intelligence. Across the table sat the highest-ranking leaders of the Japanese underworld. They spoke rapidly in their complex language, trying to negotiate a massive international trade agreement. Bae did not look around the room for a hired translator. He did not look at his heavily armed bodyguards. He only looked at Tameka. She listened closely to the foreign words, her brilliant mind easily analyzing every hidden meaning. After a tense moment of total silence, Tameka gave Bae a single, firm nod of approval. She slowly slid the thick master contract across the polished glass table, completely controlling the multi-billion-dollar empire she had personally saved. The Japanese delegates bowed deeply, showing total respect for the powerful new duo. As they quickly signed the final paperwork, Bae poured 2 glasses of expensive red wine. He handed one directly to Tameka, his dark eyes shining with deep pride. They did not need to say a single word to understand each other perfectly. The dangerous enemies of her past were gone forever, and the wicked queen who tried to destroy them was paying the ultimate price. Tameka leaned back in her heavy leather chair, taking a slow sip of her wine as she looked out over the bright Tokyo skyline. The terrified ghost had officially become the untouchable master architect of the world's most powerful criminal syndicate. She had finally stopped hiding, and for the first time in her life, she was exactly where she belonged. The most dangerous piece on the board is never the king. It's the pawn that everyone stopped paying attention to. True power doesn't always wear a tailored suit or sit at the head of the table. Sometimes it wears a gray uniform, holds a yellow cleaning rag, and waits patiently in the shadows for the perfect moment to strike. What did you think of Tameka's brilliant trap? Did Han Seo-yeon get exactly what she deserved at the hands of the cartel, or was Bae Hyun-soo too ruthless? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you loved this story, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who loves a brilliant plot twist, and subscribe to the channel for more epic tales of loyalty, betrayal, and justice. Thanks for watching.